podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, Episode 1, The Road to RC1. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Visa. Safer, better money, life, and Twit takes Visa. This is episode 1 of Windows Weekly, and I'm so glad. You know, we cast around. We knew we had to do a Windows podcast. I mean, you can't. I mean, we're doing everything else. How could you not do a Windows podcast? And I thought for about 4 seconds, and the name Paul Thurrott leapt to mind. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who writes about Windows today who is more outspoken, I think has more integrity. It's a hard thing to do when you cover just one operating system, not to be in the back pocket of the company that makes that operating system. But time and time again, Paul Thurrott has proven that he is his own man and is absolutely outspoken in what he believes. And so I'm really pleased to say, here's Paul Thurrott and a brand new podcast, Windows Weekly. Paul, great to have you aboard.
Great to be here, and thank you for that no-pressure introduction.
I read your super site for Windows. I read religiously. It's a very good place to find out what's going on with Windows. And as Windows Vista has been,
Yes,
a developing story for a year, it's been really the place to go. Is that the main thing you do?
The super site?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the main thing I do. I do a lot of different things, various email newsletters. I write for the print magazine and so forth, but super site for Windows is where I like to put the focus.
It seems like a full-time job given the amount of stuff you've got there.
Yeah, I actually just this week read that there's a theory out there that I don't exist.
You're the Betty Crocker?
There's no way that one person could do all this stuff, and that clearly I am part of the Microsoft PR machine, which my wife found very humorous.
Yeah, I bet. If you go to the Windows Vista tab on Supersite, it's winsupersite.com, and look at all you've written on Vista. I mean, there's 100 articles there, just on Vista.
Sure. Well, thank Microsoft for taking so long to develop.
It gave you lots of time.
Yeah.
Is all your coverage really now Vista coverage?
No, I'm all over the place. I mean, obviously, Microsoft's got a lot going on with Office and Xbox and other things, but I also have my finger in other pies. I look at what Apple's doing. I look at Linux a lot, so I try to get that stuff in there when appropriate. So it's not just Vista.
And I have to say that's the other reason that I thought you'd be a great choice for this is despite the fact that you cover Windows, you're clearly not a Windows bigot. I mean, you talk about Apple, and you've talked positively about Apple in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that I think helps. I often am considered an Apple bigot, and I think I'd really take umbrage at that. I think it's really important to say
this is something we should talk about sometime.
Yeah. No, but I think it's important to say they're just operating systems. It's not.
That's right. That's right.
Nothing more than that. And it's silly to pledge allegiance to an operating system. That's just nuts.
I agree.
Yeah. What kinds of things are we going to talk about in the podcast? It's really your show.
Yeah.
What do you want to do with it?
Mostly, I think obviously we're going to focus on the current developments in the world of Windows, whatever they may be. So this week we might be talking about some news items that happen to be interesting, or if Microsoft has new releases, we should talk about that stuff. I think there's always a controversy or two that we could hit on. I'd like to talk a little bit even about Office this week if we could, because I think that's an important release for Windows users. So I think we have a wide open field.
I just paid my $1.50.
Oh, yeah?
Download the Office beta.
You have to pay to download it?
$1.50.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
It's a token.
I didn't realize you had to pay for the download.
It's kind of silly. I'm not sure I understand why. And it's $1.50 each. So it was $1.50 for Vista Visio, it was $1.50 for Office, and then $1.50 for the business database.
Microsoft
plugin.
can't afford the
Guess not.
the bandwidth.
It's just so expensive. I think it's probably. I would guess it's probably just to eliminate the looky-loos. I mean, and the kids, because frankly, if you've got a credit card, it's not the amount of money; it's the fact that you have the credit card and you're serious enough about it to charge it.
Interesting.
Unless they're collecting a database, I don't know. Maybe they're putting.
Well, I'm sure they're collecting a database.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's part of it. But I think what they're going to look for eventually is they'll be able to say, hey, look, we had X number of million people download this thing, and they all paid for it, and
maybe
they're all
that's
happy
it.
to have it.
Yeah, and you're right. If 10 million people download it, we may say $1.50, but that's $15 million. That's nothing to sneeze at.
No,
that's a decent amount of money.
I mean, Microsoft probably makes that much in half an hour selling mice or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, for you and me, it's something. And one of the big stories, and it's actually just a breaking story today, and we didn't even cover it yesterday in Security Now, is this zero-day exploit in the vector library. Do you want to address that?
Yeah. This is a problem for people running Windows, period, right? Zero-day exploits. This is the latest thing with security problems, right? That Microsoft will come out with a patch. Hackers look at that information and they can figure out what they need to exploit to come out with a new hack. So this type of thing happens every month when Microsoft puts out their security updates. It happens on the off days, like this week when Microsoft is talking about other security patches and so forth. So.
This is a fairly serious one, only because even if you've got a fully patched Windows, if you're using IE, you can go to a malicious website and
right,
over.
Get a VML hack, exactly.
Yeah.
So I wish I could say that this was rare.
What is the VML, just so people understand what's going on?
Yeah, VML is the vector markup language. This is a technology that Internet Explorer uses to basically display graphics that are described as vectors, right? They're not bitmap graphics. They're vector graphics. So it's actually fairly uncommon to run into this sort of technology on the web, I'd say. But it is built into Internet Explorer. So it's a feature that hackers can attack, because as long as it's in the browser, they can put a malicious website up there, exploit the problem, and boom, you've got spyware.
It sounds similar to the metafile exploit,
exactly.
In the sense that you didn't metafiles weren't very common on websites, but once you knew there was a hole there, you could put a metafile on your website.
Exactly.
You could put a vector graphic on your website. So the question is, how do people protect themselves?
Well, my cynical response to that is don't use Internet Explorer.
That's not so cynical. I think that's good advice.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Internet Explorer 7, to be fair, is a huge advance over previous versions, but I think that if you're running Windows XP today, or God forbid an earlier version of Windows, you should look at something like Firefox or even Opera, just to secure yourself in the sense that fewer hackers are actually attacking those browsers.
Right.
So we don't really have any evidence per se that they're better built or whatever than Internet Explorer, although we have our suspicions. But the truth is, these browsers are not attacked as often.
The initial bulletin said turn off JavaScript, but it turns out that's not the only way you can take advantage of it. You actually have to disable the DLL if you want to kind of prevent this exploit.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like a good choice for most people.
It's not a choice that most people would understand at all, actually.
Yeah, so forget it. I don't use IE. Is IE7 immune? Do we know?
I don't know. Let me see.
There's some question on the net about this, and I haven't seen an definitive answer.
It's not clear. Various Windows versions are exploitable, including all versions of XP.
Even patched versions. That's the thing that really is scary.
It does say all versions of Internet Explorer, but I'm not sure if that means pre-release versions of 7 as well.
Has your experience been that 7 is more robust and perhaps even more secure?
Well, 7 is absolutely more secure. I guess the question is going to be whether it's secure enough, right?
Right.
That it's better than the previous version should be a given, and it is. It's even better on Windows Vista for various reasons. They're taking advantage of certain technologies in Vista to be even more secure than is possible in XP. But I think the proof is going to be a year from now, when we can look back on the last year and say, well, how did it do? Because unfortunately Microsoft made a big mistake integrating Internet Explorer into Windows, and we're all still paying for that now.
Yeah, there's no way around it. It's there.
It's just, yeah.
I hear a little rattling from the cord. If you can just put it up a side or something like that, it's like it clonks, and what happens is it comes through the mic when it's clonking. And also, you can move the mic a little closer to your mouth. It's a little, not too much because it was a little too loud yesterday, but just a little bit more.
How's that?
Yeah, that's better. It sounds more intimate.
Okay.
And we like that.
That's what I'm looking for.
Sultry tones of all throughout. Yeah. Hey, we should address Thurrott, by the way. Is it Thurrott? Thoreau?
It is Thurrott.
I guess
and it
right.
is French-Canadian, though I am neither French nor Canadian.
Well, wait a minute. Somebody was French-Canadian in there.
I know. It's confusing.
It didn't come from nowhere.
That's true. It didn't come from anywhere. Or it did come from somewhere, I guess.
All right.
The wilds of Newfoundland, as I understand it.
Is that where your family was from?
Yes.
Yeah, that's neat. I'm a Quebecois, as a matter of fact. So.
Oh, very good.
Couple of expats. So that's the exploit down. You said there you want to talk a little bit about the new Office. What's new in the news from the Office?
Well, you were talking about spending $1.50. In some ways, $1.50.
It's a good deal. Frankly,
on the Office 2007 beta isn't too shabby.
Because I can use it for a while, right? They said something like till middle of next year.
That's right. And this version of Office is going to be very exciting, which is just a weird thing to even say. I don't know that Office has ever generated any excitement per se.
The new Office is here. The new Office is here.
Yes.
It sounds a little nerdy, I admit, Paul.
I feel weird just saying that. But, the truth is, this all started last fall when Microsoft had a big developer event out in LA last September. And Windows Vista was supposed to be the star of the show, but Office 2007 absolutely stole the show. They showed off their UI for the first time and really answered a lot of the criticism about, what can you do to a product that's super mature, has been around for a long time. I mean, Word is a word processor. You process words. I mean, what else could you add to this thing to make it more useful? And instead of just going the evolutionary approach with the UI, they decided just to change the whole thing. And not so much on a whim, but because Office had really outgrown the limitations of the menu and toolbar type approach that Office had been taken since its inception. So it's absolutely something that people should take a look at. Whether this is in a business situation or just individuals, I think this is going to be the first version of Office in a long time that people are going to want to upgrade to. It's actually pretty exciting, like I said. Is it?
I mean, obviously, if you look at it, and that's all I've had time to do, it's a very different UI. But is it more than just a new UI? I mean, is there actually new functionality as well?
Yeah, there's some new functionality. I mean, Office doesn't, they don't really go crazy with each release as far as new functionality.
Well, I mean, how much can you change a word processor? I mean,
exactly. But, they have an interesting statistic at Microsoft when they get their feedback with every release, and customers are always providing them with information about how things are going and the features that they want. And every year, the top 10 feature requests for Office are already features that are in there.
Yeah, people don't know.
People just don't know how to find them. So
there's something to be said for that. That's a problem.
Yeah, so I think it would be humorous for them to actually come up with a new feature list and have it include things that they added back in 1997. But
inevitably, some wiseacre like you would point out,
But I have to give them a little credit because the new UI actually exposes functionality in a way that even a beginner can figure out how to do things that, though they might have been previously possible, were very hard or almost impossible to find, and now they're just right there. And I think that's cool.
Can you give me an example of something that people?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff. Right. So, a lot of that stuff would be just something simple. Like I have a table of data, and I want to present it in a very attractive way using Excel, for example.
Right.
So you can make charts and graphs and things like that, but if you don't really know what you're doing, it's very difficult to actually create something that's beautiful. And one of the things that's nice in Office is that you can create really high quality charts and graphs in Excel, for example. But you can also go over these little galleries that they have, and you can watch as the effect you're selecting changes the thing that's selected, and then choose to apply it or not based on what you see. You don't have to go through the old style, which was apply a setting, look at it, and say, oh, wait, that's not what I wanted, and then go back. And for a typical person, a Joe Blow user, a lot of that stuff can be very scary because it's not always clear how you can get back to where you started.
Right.
So the nice thing about Office 2007 is you can mouse over this stuff and you can see how it's going to change, but it doesn't take effect until you actually click on it.
That's an example of a feature that takes advantage of, frankly, the advanced hardware users, and now that's commonplace now. I mean, you couldn't really spend the CPU cycles, to do something like that before.
Right.
And now you've got lots of memory, you've got fast processors, you can afford to do that.
Right, and Microsoft surely has never been credited with taking advantage of the hardware before in Office, so this is a nice time, a nice break, I think, between Vista and Office 2007, that they're really going for it from a graphical point of view.
The thing that was most controversial about Office, and I think will be when it's released, and to some degree in Vista as well, is this new ribbon feature. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in previous versions of Office, all of the application used a traditional menu and toolbar type approach, right? And we've all seen those joke images where Word has been loaded down with 127 toolbars. And
blame David Pogue for that. I think he was the first to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but that's a very real problem. And by the way, that image exists because, by the way, that was possible. So,
yeah, right. It's not made up.
Yeah, so when you have X number of thousand of commands and so forth, I mean, menus and toolbars don't really work. So over the past few versions of Office, they've done other things to try to bring this functionality to the front. They've added task panes, which I actually sort of liked, but really it was just another area on the side of the screen this time where commands would show up or whatever. They added smart tags, IntelliSense features, and so forth. So with the ribbon, what they've done is they've replaced all of that with a single area at the top of each application window. Although, actually, to be fair, we should also note that this ribbon is not available in all Office 2007 apps, right? It's available in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, and only in certain parts of Outlook. It's not available in other Office applications, right? So presumably the next version, they'll finish porting everything over. So I think they were trying to go for the heavy hitters this time.
Right.
And what they're basically doing is they instead of menus and toolbars, they have tabs and they have ribbons. And each tab has a ribbon associated with it. You can click tabs like you would menus, but instead of things popping down, that ribbon area, which is like a big toolbar, changes. And so, for example, if you're in Microsoft Word, the functionality that most people need most of the time, just in the course of writing, is available right there. So things like copying and pasting, fonts and font styles, paragraph styles, and that sort of thing. But then you can go to other tabs for things like insert or page layout. Reviewing is one actually that I use a lot as a writer. But this stuff is all logically laid out. And what's nice about it is because it's highly graphical, you sort of see things there. They're not tiny little icons typically. And they have nice mouse overs where you move the mouse over something and you get a really nice pop-up window that describes exactly what that thing does. Not just the name, but a paragraph or two of text.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And the other thing that's kind of interesting with this release, and we see this the first time in this the new version that came out in the past week, this technical refresh, you can actually hide the ribbon to get back more space. I was joking with a guy in the Office team recently about the ribbon, and I was saying, the only thing I don't like about it is it takes up a lot of space. And he says, well, it really doesn't take up that much space. I mean, if you add up the size of the menu and the size of the typical toolbars you would have in, say, an application like Word, you'll see that they're actually comparable. I said, well, what does comparable mean? He says, well, the ribbon is actually 2 or 3 pixels bigger. I said, well, then it is bigger.
Okay.
So I guess a lot of people complained about that, and whether it's perception or whatever, but now you can hide the ribbon. And what's funny about that is in an application like Word, you've gone from that David Pogue example that you were talking about where all of the toolbars are squeezing out the editing space down to a teeny little
It's about the size of a stick of Wrigley's gum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now with this, you can hide the ribbon, and what you've got is something that looks like Notepad. There's almost no UI going on at all.
I think writers really like that. I know many writers spend a lot of time hacking just to get that look. They don't want to see anything.
I spend more time customizing Word than I care to admit.
Yeah.
And
well, that's your
with
tool.
This version, yeah. So this version, basically, I move 2 icons around, and I hide the ribbon, and I've got the ultimate text processor right here, and I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
We've been talking on the TV show on Call for Help with Mr. Excel about Excel 12. Is everything 12 Version 12, the new Office.
You just called me Mr. Excel.
No, I know. You're Mr. Windows. He's Mr. Excel.
Because I almost know nothing about Excel. So,
you're Mr. Windows. No, Mr. Excel is Bill Jelen, and he actually calls himself Mr. Excel. Whether that's a good thing or not, you'll have to be the judge. But he certainly knows about Excel. And he actually likes the ribbon. He's been very bullish on the user interface. And now, as bad as writers are with Word, people who use spreadsheets might even be worse. I mean, they really are tied to the keystrokes, to the way the UI is. Do you think business is going to rebel a little bit? I mean, we're going to have to retrain, aren't we?
Yeah, that's the fear, right? That anytime you change the user interface, you're going to have to retrain.
Business hates that.
Yeah, and there is no option, by the way, to go back to the classic UI. I mean, Microsoft did look into that, but there is no option for that. So Microsoft's response to that is that they don't think trading costs are going to be very high, and that actually all this additional functionality that they're going to find is going to make them more productive. I think it's somewhere in the middle. But I honestly, I don't want to say a champion, but I'm a big fan of the big changes. I think that it's one of the disappointments I have in Vista in some ways is that it's not going far enough. But with Office 2007, I really like that they've taken a stand. And I was so afraid over the past year that they were eventually going to come down and say, okay, we're not going to go whole hog on this thing. Sorry. We've gotten too many complaints. And I'm really glad that they've stuck to the guns on this one, because I think ultimately it is going to make people more productive. Yes, there's going to be a retraining cost. I don't think it's going to be as high as some people think, but I think in the end, we're all going to have a better Office suite as a result, and I think it's going to be worth it.
You also cover Xbox, and there is some Xbox news this week. Microsoft announced its HD DVD for Xbox.
Yes, they did.
Let me turn my phone off in the background. That's Microsoft calling to say, wait a minute. Now, you're an Xbox 360 fan. Are you going to run out and buy that HD DVD?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
Yes, and I'm going to do that because I have to review it and not because I'm a total fanboy.
How much is it going to be? Have they said?
My story.
Yeah,
I'm sticking with it.
Yeah. Honey, I have to buy it.
I have to. Yeah, exactly. It's a tax write-off.
Yeah.
It's going to be less than $200.
That's considering that people are paying $500 for the standalone units,
and $1,000 for a standalone Blu-ray.
That's
drive.
pretty attractive. $200. You may be glad you bought that 360.
Yeah, no, the Xbox 360 itself is a little bit loud for a nice home theater situation, I guess, unless you did something.
Is that the fans?
Sound conditioning.
Is that the?
Yeah, this thing really kicks up a jet storm of sound, but. But still, I would say plenty of people are using their old Xboxes as DVD players. There's a lot of good wireless stuff going on with the Xbox 360, and this is just a cool add-on. It's nice that it's an add-on. You don't have to pay for it unless you want it.
Right.
And certainly, the price is right. There's no doubt about that.
Boy, that's really a remarkable price.
Yes.
Any other news that you wanted to share with our audience on our first episode?
I think the big news this week, the thing I'm most concerned about is there's a lot going on with the European Union and Windows Vista and potentially now Office 2007, where basically competitors to Microsoft are able, they have a friendly ear now. They can complain about what Microsoft's doing with some of its products. And there was a news report this week in the Wall Street Journal that Adobe and Symantec have actually officially petitioned the EU about Windows Vista and are trying to get Microsoft to remove features from Vista.
Oh, man.
And
how does that benefit anybody? That's what I don't get.
Right. So I don't. The only people it benefits are the people who work at
Symantec.
I would imagine, right?
Right.
I mean, I think in the case of Symantec, my stance here, so to speak, is that Symantec and other companies are doing something important. We need security software. But in many ways, they're also riding the back of the problems that Microsoft has created in Windows over the years, and that as Microsoft is shutting down those problems, we should applaud Microsoft for doing that.
Right.
That Windows should be more secure than it is. Some of the things that Symantec is complaining about are just absolutely ludicrous, and there's so much more for them to do. They cover such a wide range of security issues that the things they're complaining about in Vista are just ridiculous, and I think anti-consumer ultimately.
Well, there was a complaint, maybe a little more legitimate, by Symantec and other antivirus companies that the security in Windows Vista was keeping them from doing a good job as security companies. Where do you come on down on that?
Yeah. So what they're talking about is that there's a specific technology in Vista called kernel patch protection. And it's designed to prevent anybody, malicious hackers or even security companies, or even Microsoft, by the way, from patching the kernel at runtime. So, in Windows XP, malicious hackers could get into XP and patch the kernel, or Symantec could. And that there are certain capabilities you get.
There's a difference there between hackers and Symantec. Let's point that out.
There is a difference, that's true.
Yes.
But ultimately, what you're doing is changing the Windows kernel, and that's not the system that Microsoft sold, and et cetera, et cetera. So what Microsoft has decided with Vista is that they're just not going to allow that practice. And that means that Microsoft software won't do it.
I
do
think
too.
they're right,
Yeah, and what's interesting is if something tries to patch the kernel, if something actually does manage to circumvent this technology, your system will just blue screen and shut down.
Oh.
Yeah, there's no middle ground. There's no... if they somehow manage to get in there, they're just going to shut it down. And the idea is that you don't want that code to exist in the kernel space for any amount of time, because if it's malicious code, right, you could come up with a system that's been compromised.
So this is how you'd install a rootkit, for instance, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I think they're right, and of course, a security company would like to be able to do this, but that doesn't mean it's appropriate for them to do it. And what's to separate Sony from a security company?
Well, a great distance apparently.
Yeah,
but they, I think this is the right approach, because if malicious hackers cannot patch the kernel, then there is no need for anyone else to patch it either. So,
assuming that Microsoft does a good job, you're right.
Yes.
That's always the question mark.
That's the theory. That's the theory. I guess we'll see. But, I just, to me, this is just, ultimately, if we can talk about anything, but what it all boils down to is, how does this affect people?
Right.
The people who actually use this. This is a win for people, and for Symantec to argue otherwise is silly.
I have to say I agree with you. Yeah. How you've been playing with RC1? How close? Looking at RC1, how close do you think we are to a really finished, a ready to manufacture gold master of Vista?
Well, we're about 30 days away.
It has to be. It has to be.
Yeah. You know what? This is terrible. I got an email about a month ago, probably from a Mac guy. Actually, I get a lot of these kind of emails, and he says, "I finally figured you out. I know what you're doing. You've been dumping all over Vista all year long to get people to come to your site, and this thing's going to be released, and you're going to do a total 180, and you're going to talk about how wonderful it is." And and I read this thing and I thought, that's terrible. I don't think like that, and I'm not going to do that. And RC1 came out and I said, oh my God, they did it. They turned it around. This guy wrote me and said, "You did it even sooner than I thought you were going to." I felt like such a sellout. But it's amazing.
You got to tell the truth. It was crappy for a long time.
Yes.
And you just you have to tell the truth.
I was hugely disappointed back in May when they shipped Beta 2 as the version that they were going to give out to people, because right after Beta 2, they shipped a version internally into testers that was demonstrably better. And I felt bad that so many million people were going to get a pretty shabby experience.
Right.
Now, RC1 is a different story. RC1 is the hardware and software compatibility, especially on 32-bit systems, is hugely improved over previous betas. The stability, the fit and finish, the performance is dramatically better. You can actually play games and they run reasonably fast.
We should point out that when you're using beta software, often there's debugging code in there that does slow it down. You can't expect beta software to run at full speed. That's part of running betas.
Yes, but you're right, and that's true.
I'm sure they're tuning it, but there's also debugging stuff in there.
Yes. And presumably this will just keep getting better as we head toward the final finish line there. But RC1 is a huge improvement. It's not perfect. I mean, it was such a big improvement that it's hard when it first comes out not to be very excited about it. And then, of course, your opinion of it goes down a little bit over time as one crucial application doesn't install properly, or things go wrong, and that's what happens. But
how has it been in terms of compatibility? Pretty good.
Pretty good. The hardware compatibility has actually been excellent. I would say, I installed this in a reasonable number of systems, a couple of desktops, several laptops. Hardware compatibility has been amazingly good, and that's true even on the 64-bit side, which was really unexpected. Software compatibility, not as good. Horrible on the 64-bit side, but getting better. I was so excited to see certain games running, for example, that I decided to go and install the whole set of games that, I think represent what people are playing, modern 3D games that take advantage of the hardware and so forth. And then was shocked to discover actually that most of them won't install properly.
Well, we know that'll be fixed. That's got to be fixed.
Yes, right.
I mean, if you can't run, Battlefield or Half-Life or...
exactly.
Nobody's going to buy. Frankly, not nobody, but it's certainly going to cut
gamers.
Gamers,
yeah, they want speed.
They want performance, and really, a lot of the market for Windows, at least in the home, is for gamers.
Exactly. So, from a performance standpoint, something wonderful happened because I can tell you that Beta 2 and a little bit beyond Beta 2, you could install Half-Life and sort of run Half-Life 2 and sort of run it. But on Windows Vista RC1, this thing runs basically full speed. It runs just about as fast as it does under XP. So that's fantastic.
That is really exciting. And does it look better, or is it just the same?
No, it looks the same. I mean, it doesn't take advantage of any of the DirectX 10 stuff that's specific to Windows Vista.
Right.
So.
Although I'm sure games will come out very, very rapidly if they're not already coming out that will do that. Mm-hmm. Well, that's exciting. We'll have, of course, more detailed reviews of RC1 as time goes by. I mean, we, in some ways, I was thinking of calling this Countdown to Vista because certainly for the next few months, that's the story. But it really is so much more than that. So
it really is, yeah. And I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, one of the things that is interesting about this release is that it is like that train on the track, and it's flying down the tunnel, and it's going to hit home eventually. And Microsoft's going to finish this thing next month, probably come hell or high water, unless there's some unbelievably unexpected, deeply integrated problem in there. They're just going to finish it.
When you say 30 days, is that their published timetable, or is that your best guess? Or?
No, that's their internal timetable. They haven't really. I've been writing about this for a while. I didn't realize I didn't say this publicly, but they've been talking about finishing this by October 21st.
It makes sense if you're going to get it. It takes about a month, 6 weeks to start pressing the discs, getting them out into the channel.
Yeah, so you're talking about mid-November or late November, December. For business customers. Supposedly they're just waiting for January because of partner concerns. PC makers and the people that want to sell Windows Vista compatible software in Best Buy and retail stores like that have basically just asked them for more time.
Interesting. So the version that we get in January will be the same version that's going to ship as RTM in October.
Yes, and I'm actually surprised to be able to say yes to that because my guess all along was that they would continue to hone this thing over the time period between RTM and the public release. But I was just talking to somebody this week about that, and they said, actually, well, obviously there'll be some bug fixes and so forth, but their only plan for updating this before it comes out publicly is for them to ship what they're calling the Ultimate Edition update, the Ultimate Extras or whatever for the Ultimate Edition.
Kind of the plus pack for Ultimate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for the people who care to pay for the very best or whatever.
for the aquarium screensaver, it'll be $15 more. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
We had to work really hard to get those fish look realistic. Well, I'm glad, one of the reasons that I'm really thrilled to have you on the TWiT Network doing a Windows podcast is your deep sources in Microsoft. And I think it's really, it's great to get the story. There's a lot of speculation about this, but it's really great to get the story accurately. And so I just want to say thank you. I'm really thrilled that you're here with us.
And you won't be thanking me when none of this happens. But
I'm going to put you on the spot.
But you're welcome.
When does Service Pack 1 come out? That's what I want to know.
I can tell you that. This is one of those actually interesting secrets about Windows Vista. They have discussed this publicly, but I've been surprised that there hasn't been a bigger story around this, and that is that there's a server version of Vista currently called Longhorn Server that they're working on as well, and it's on a slightly different trajectory. Right? They're going to ship that thing sometime in the second half of 2007.
Right.
Longhorn Server is based on the same code base as Windows Vista, but it has a slightly updated kernel, and you would expect, because it's been gestating a little bit longer, it will have, by the time it's released, that it's a newer version, right, at maybe a 6.1 compared to 6.0 for Windows Vista. When Longhorn Server ships around this time next year, Microsoft is actually going to ship Windows Vista Service Pack 1. And unlike previous Service Packs, this will actually change the kernel in Windows Vista so that it brings it up to the Longhorn Server.
Oh, interesting.
Spec, yeah. And that's
a big upgrade.
That's a big upgrade. That's not typically kernel upgrades are new versions.
Right,
so
right.
I don't know if there are going to be any other end-user features and so forth, but that's actually a big upgrade. So,
well, it was a few years ago when Microsoft made the decision to kind of bring together the two forks of Windows. The consumer Windows 95 ME version and the NT version. It's really good, and I think to hear that they're going to continue that there's really going to be just one Windows kernel. It'll be the same in server and the same in the Vista.
And actually, that instance was when I started the SuperSite for Windows. I was in a rare moment of excitement for me. I thought this was it. They're going to put NT and they're going to give it to consumers. That's wonderful.
Right.
And I thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread at the time.
Well, and you were right. It was a major improvement in stability. Really made a big difference. I mean, you just can't compare Windows 98 to Windows XP in terms of stability.
No.
And we're just crossing our fingers that Vista is going to be secure, and I think there's no doubt now that it's going to be stable. But is it going to be secure? I guess is the big question. What's your feeling on that?
It's just like IE. There's absolutely no doubt that Windows Vista is more secure than Windows XP. There is no doubt.
Right. And it will be a major target. It'll be the first thing people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a target now.
Yeah.
It's scary in a way to me, by the way, that they're releasing security updates to Windows Vista during the beta, although I guess you could look at that from the glass half full side and say, well, that's actually a nice thing,
at least
right?
They're patching it.
At least they're supporting it, yeah. Okay. So it's
not end of life yet. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. That's good. They're still supporting Vista, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. So I'll try not to be negative about that.
Paul, we're going to do this every Friday. Every week we'll talk about another aspect. This was kind of an omnibus. Of course, we'll always do news and what's going on, but this was kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that because I just wanted everybody to get a flavor. In fact, we didn't even talk about the Zune, and I know we'll do that some more next week.
Yes.
But I do have one last Zune question for you.
Okay.
Brown, black, or white? What are you going to do?
Oh, you got to get brown because you know it's not going to last.
You're right.
A collector's item.
I've been trying to find somebody who wants a brown Zune.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, I found one woman who does, and she said it reminds her of Dune, and she wants a Dune Zune.
A Dune Zune. Very good. This is their main innovation over the iPod, so
brown.
Is brown.
Is that what? Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think.
We shall see. It's great to talk to you, folks. Paul's writings, his voluminous writings, and well worth reading, are on winsupersite.com. You can also read them in Windows IT Pro. There is probably nobody better, certainly nobody more honest and forthright and objective about Windows than Paul Thurrott. And I'm really thrilled to have you part of the Twit Network.
You're not gonna suck up to me like this every week.
Every week, you'll get used to it. No, this is it. This is you get one freebie, and after this, I'm going to be a son of a gun.
Thank God. Well, thank you, sir. It's always good to talk to you.
Good. Thank you, Paul. We'll talk again next week.
Sounds good.
On Windows Weekly.